Hi guys, my name is Ben Guilford. I'm the owner of the Firebrick Company, and in this video we're going to take you through how to install the flue for your wood-fired oven. We're also going to take you through some tips on what to do if you're going through a roof or if you're doing anything other than a simple outdoor installation.
So we finished building our D105 brick oven behind me, and we of course then needed to get a flue installed. Now, if you're building your oven outdoors, so if you're out in maybe it's a lovely corner of your backyard and that's where you're building the oven, then you can just use the flue and the cowling that come with the kit. It's a single length of flue, it's 3 feet long with a cowling for the top. So you can just install those. But just make sure you're following the safety diagram that's in the written plans for your oven, which will actually show you the clearances that you need to have from combustible materials away from the flue, because that's actually probably the most dangerous part of the oven is the flue. It gets very hot, and if you do have it too close to combustible materials, you can set them on fire. And so you want to be very careful that you're smart about how you're installing that flue, how close it is to things that can burn. All right, now here we're building this oven in our showroom, so we're indoors. And actually this is not that uncommon. A lot of our ovens do get built indoors or partially indoors. Probably, I think about 3/4 of ovens that we sell end up getting built underneath a pergola or veranda. So the body of the oven sits outside, but the mouth of the oven, this part here, is sitting underneath the roof line. And a lot of people then need to run the flue up through the roof to get it out clear of the pergola. Now, if that's the case for you, if you're running your flue up through any kind of roof, our basic instruction is get a plumber. Get a qualified professional. So it's going to be different in different countries, but in Australia it's going to be a plumber who has the right accreditation for installing flues to suit pizza ovens and wood heaters. If you are one of those customers, so your oven is actually built in under a pergola, or maybe in a lovely alfresco area where it's going to have to go through some kind of sealing, we really recommend that you just get a qualified professional to supply and install a compliant flue system. Okay, rather than running around trying to buy flue components that you think are right to go through that roof, you'd be much better off just getting a qualified plumber to supply those components and install them. It's kind of similar to, I don't know, maybe going out and buying PowerPoints for your electrician to install. You don't do that. You get them to supply them and install them. Okay, so if you're going through a ceiling of any description, 100% of the time we recommend having a qualified professional install it for you, because then your home insurance is going to be valid. In Australia, at least, if you were to install your own flue, you may well invalidate your insurance policy on your home, which is not great. Can't recommend you do that. So really recommend that if you're going through a roof, get a qualified professional to do it for you. Now, if you've installed your oven down in the corner of a yard, maybe where you're not going through a roof, in fact you've got plenty of clearance from combustible materials, then you can just use the flue and the hat that come with your kit. And very, very simple to install those. The flue is actually designed to just sleeve into the flue that you have on your oven. So it's coming out of the precast flue gallery. You can just sleeve the flue into that and then place the cowling on top. If you're in an area that's subject to wind, so maybe you get gusts of wind coming through, like we do at the front of our showroom here, what we've actually done for our oven at the front is we've just put in a couple of self-tapping screws to hold the flue together, to actually hold the length of flue onto the sleeve that's coming out of the precast flue gallery. And the same thing for the cowling. It's quite windy out the front, so we actually put a couple of screws into the cowling through the flue, so it's holding it together and stopping that cowling from falling off. So if you're in a windy area, that's something to think about. If it's pretty sheltered, you probably won't have to worry about that at all. All right, so I've installed install the flue. Now, I will make a disclaimer here, guys. We're pretending that we're outdoors, okay? Please, if you're under a ceiling, don't install a flue like this. This is a pretend scenario that we're outdoors and we've got plenty of clearance away from combustible materials, both horizontally, so around the flue we're allowing clearance, but we're also allowing complete clearance above it. You can't have anything above this flue at all. It needs to be just daylight directly above, okay? So please make sure you don't go and build one inside a room like this. Now, one thing you will notice is there's fingerprints all over the flue, and right now they're not that noticeable. They're just little smudges. But once we fire the oven and we get some real heat into this flue, the flue will start to sort of discolor. It will start to go a sort of coppery color, which is really nice. I really like it. But if you have anything on the surface, any oils or maybe, I don't know, some fingerprints, they will get etched into the surface permanently, right, once you get it hot enough. Actually, it was one of the very first ovens that I built. I helped install a flue, and we fired it right up and got it good and hot, and then I found there was a handprint on the side of the flue. You just couldn't miss it. So we have a way of avoiding that, and it's quite simple. We're just going to clean the flue before we start firing it. Cleaning the flue is basically a two-stage process. Firstly, you're going to wipe it down with some kind of solvent. I'm going to use methylated spirits because I've got some handy, but you could equally use prep wash, thinners, any good solvent, just something to really dissolve that oil that's in your fingerprints that you put on the flue. Once we've done that, that will evaporate almost immediately. We can then come after it with I've just got some warm soapy water. I've used ordinary dishwashing liquid. So I'm just going to give it a wipe down with that, and then I'm going to polish it dry. And that should remove any residual fingerprints that are on there, so that when I fire it, I don't etch anything into the surface. So I thought I'd actually address a few of the really commonly asked questions that we get about installing the flue for a wood-fired oven. One question we get quite a lot is it an issue if we have to go fairly high? Maybe you need 3 or 4 lengths of flue to actually get through your ceiling, and is that going to affect the performance of the oven? And I have good news, it's actually better. So the draw that's created by the flue. So draw is another term for suction. So the draw that the flue creates is actually determined by several factors. It's a little bit complicated, but the main factors are the area of the flue, so how wide it is, and the height of the flue. So the taller you go, the harder the flue will actually draw, which is fantastic because that means all of the smoke that's generated by the oven will just go straight up the chimney, even if you do have a bit of a breeze in the area. All right. Now, the way we've designed the ovens with our precast flue gallery is to get all of the smoke to go up into the flue and out the top. And it will, providing you don't have too much of a crosswind. So if your oven is in a nice sheltered area, so it's down in a nice corner of the yard, and it's well sheltered, then you're actually going to find a single length of flue like this is going to draw just fine. Okay, but if you've got a bit of a breeze in the area, if it's a bit exposed and a bit windy, then you may find you get some smoke coming out of the mouth of the oven, but there are ways of controlling that. And if you want to learn a bit more about that, please have a look at video on how to fire up your wood-fired oven. We've done some techniques for controlling the flow of smoke up the chimney. Another question that we get is, I actually can't go directly up. I actually need to sort of go off on an angle. Is that a thing? And absolutely, you can. Again, we always recommend getting a plumber to do that kind of work for you. But there's nothing to stop your plumber from putting in a 45-degree bend in the flue. You could even do that immediately at the top here. You could go straight into a 45-degree bend, straight out of the top of the flue gallery, which is bend the flue back over on a 45-degree angle, and that'll take you across the distance that you need to, and then you put in another 45 to go back to vertical. So absolutely you can do that. Now, doing that does effectively sort of slow the flow of the smoke because you're forcing it to do a bend, and then you're forcing it to move horizontally when it really wants to go vertical. So that does sort of diminish the draw of the flue, but typically when you do go vertical again, because you've had to go maybe around, I don't know, maybe you've gone around the eave of the veranda, for example, we recommend then going up maybe a good length or maybe even 2 lengths from that point, and that will overcome the resistance that you've created in that bend, in that 45 to 45 degree section. Okay, so yes, absolutely, you can bend your flue, but one thing you can't do is go 90 degrees and go horizontal. Unless you put a forced extraction system on the other end, you just can't do that. But again, guys, this is all very much the realm of the plumber, of the professional. So we really recommend, if you're in a situation like that where your flue is going to need to do some kind of fancy movements, it's going to need to be bent, or it's going to need to go through a roof, get the professionals involved. Keep your home insurance, it's worth having. In Australia, there are standards for the installation of flues, and that's, again, plumbers' domain. They know those standards back to front. So there are standards around the height that a flue needs to be above a structure that's adjacent to it. So if a structure is within a certain distance of your flue will need to be a certain distance above that structure. That's all contained in those standards. However, you may also want to just touch base with your local council just to check if they have some rules of their own. One of the things I really encourage people to do is try and be thoughtful of your neighbours if you can. So think about, well, there's going to be a small amount of smoke generated when you start firing the oven. That first 5 or 10 minutes, you tend to get some smoke being created. And is that going to just waft directly into your neighbour's yard and irritate them? Could you take your flue a little bit higher? Would that be a problem? You could put an additional length of flue on and take the flue up a bit higher, which will then, have the smoke hopefully not getting into the neighbour's yard. That's something to think about. Just trying to be thoughtful. Also, just sometimes it's nice to think about sight lines. So if you've got a gorgeous view and you whack a great big flue up in it and it's interfering with your neighbour's view, they might not be wrapped with that. But again, that's one of those things which comes down to you and your neighbours and to the local rules in the area that you live in. That's about it for flues. That we do get more questions coming in for flues. Check out the frequently asked questions section on our website. We keep putting up more answers to questions on there on a regular basis. So make sure you jump on there, check out that section because we're trying to answer as many of your questions as we can there.